So super excited to be here at AIM10X and talking to my friends from Generation. So let's start over with an introduction. Nicky, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Stefan. Really excited to be here. My name is Nicky. I'm on the growth investment team at Generation. I've been part of Generation since the get-go, part of the founding team back in 2004, and have been focused across the piece on industrials, energy, and supply chain over the years.
Awesome. What about you, Lucia?
So I'm a little bit fresher than Nicky on the Generation team. I've been around for just over 2 years on the growth investing team, and I've had the pleasure of being part of the 09 journey over those 2 years. Excited
Amazing.
to be here.
Yeah, same. Generation Investment, tell us a little bit more.
So we were founded now coming up to 20 years ago, and the insight was that sustainability was going to completely transform the way the world works, the way that businesses have to operate. And so the idea with founding Generation was making an investment fund that took seriously all the things that investment funds take seriously, like how do companies grow and how are they profitable and business model, but also thinking about how does sustainability drive value for this business? How does this business help us get to a more sustainable world? How do they help their customers do that? And we really believed, and we still believe, and we think 09 is a great example, that the companies that can really achieve this lockstep will be, huge sources of value accrual to the economy and to themselves. And so, today we are a team of over 100 people. We manage kind of north of $40 billion in assets. So it's been a growth story over the last 20 years. And on the growth team where Nicky and I sit, we have the fortune of investing in sort of fast-growing technology companies that are accelerating our transition.
Awesome. No, thanks for explaining that. I want to double click on supply chain, and obviously you've been investors in different supply chain technologies. When we were actually at Davos at the World Economic Forum, supply chain was a big topic as well. What are you seeing in terms of what are the big trends in supply chain and what's top of mind for executives?
Well, I think as we gather here today at AIM10X, supply chain network risk continues to be at all-time highs amidst seemingly endless economic and geopolitical uncertainties. This is compounded by the fact that we collectively spent the last decades of building up long, complicated and complex supply chains, mostly focused on minimizing costs. As a result, we essentially removed buffers and the flexibility to deal with disruptions. COVID has been one of the recent examples, or one of the many examples in recent history that exhibited or showed these vulnerabilities. As a result, companies are really pushing to get back to pre-pandemic service levels and ensuring the flow of goods. So in short, supply chain is really top of mind now for boards as well as CEOs. So the list of topics for supply chain execs is quite long. Maybe three that stuck out for us is, firstly, visibility seems to be really the key for end-to-end optimization. Clearly, there's a lot we can do in terms of technological and organizational change to close data gaps, eradicate data silos, but we need to do more, and it needs more leadership around collaboration up and down the supply chain to really get to resiliency and flexibility and agility ultimately. Secondly, for many here in the room, people are continues to be a constraint. That has been the case ever since the pandemic. As a case in point, some companies that we know have really experienced over 50% turnover in people on their manufacturing sites and have really struggled to get that back up. So I think we believe there's a continued push and urgency to go to automation, but also upskilling of employees to ultimately debottleneck supply networks. On top of all of this, or underlying really, is environmental and climate change, ultimately compounding the disruptions and amplifying some of those supply chain shocks. Companies around the world are also taking action and are trying to align their operations with climate targets set out in the Paris Agreement. And as we are moving from targets to ultimately operationalizing goals, supply chain leaders will be really at the forefront on delivering those goals. So stepping back, when you look at that in aggregate, that means that we will ultimately move from a fairly two-dimensional game of balancing cost with service levels to a multi-dimensional optimization challenge, which ultimately means we can't sit on the status quo. We need to make fast changes, continue the digitization of the supply chains, which has the technology retooling side of it, but also the organizational side of it.
100%.
So there's a lot to do, basically.
No, for sure. And by the way, we absolutely concur with that. I think that's what we are seeing day in, day out, like the interest in better visibility, better what-if scenario planning. To your point, collaboration downstream, upstream, across the value chain is a big topic of interest. Now back to where you're making your investments. You've invested, in various supply chain technologies. What's your view actually on the supply chain technology market, and why is this an interesting market to generation?
We have long been attracted to supply chain technology because it delivers both business results and sustainability outcomes. We have, over the last years, at Generation, put our money where our mouth is, and we have chosen visibility and planning as our two main intervention points. Specifically, when it comes to planning, we believe that demand and supply planning will be key to balance the multidimensional business priorities and constraints around cost, customer service, risk, and sustainability. And we therefore believe that O9 has a particular strong role to play in solving this particular problem.
Now, that makes a ton of sense. What are some of the technology innovations in the broader supply chain space that you're excited about?
Well, the thing we're really excited about and why we're here today is because we're really excited, big picture, about integrated planning and what you guys are driving. And we see, how you guys continue to innovate with bringing more into the fold there. So including even now kind of looping ESG planning into the broader supply chain planning piece. So we continue to be excited about those new innovations. And then I think big picture, when we look at the market, there are maybe three things that we think are pretty interesting. One is this idea of really, really integrating carbon planning with your supply chain planning. We're not believers that this should be a checkbox exercise. We're really interested in the technologies that are making it possible for you to real-time make decisions and understand what the carbon impact of that is. We think that's a very valuable, properly strategic planning way of seeing the world, as opposed to you get to the end of the year. And this is also important to know at the end of the year, your carbon, your scope 1, 2, and 3. But we think it's extremely valuable to be able to plan for that and change your mind and make decisions real time. To Nikki's point about the financial lockstep. So that's one thing. And then I think the second thing, and you can't laugh because I know a lot of people will maybe say this, but we're very excited about AI and everything that AI can unlock for supply chains. Some of the awesome generative AI stuff that you guys have been integrating into the product. But I think more broadly, this idea of really being able to digitize knowledge in a way that hasn't been possible before. I think really being able to have a really, really good, extremely detailed view of where your supply chain risks might be and having visibility in that sense, I think is a huge unlock for supply chain leaders and for how we manage things. And then the third thing, sort of to Nikki's point, is another way of thinking about visibility, just in the truest sense of where are the things. And I think that actually is something that we can now do with more detail than we ever could before. So, one of our other investments is P44, which gets us, increased visibility as to where things are in global supply chains. But I think this is only going to improve and improve. And so all these things combined, I think, mean that supply chain leaders can make really, really precise decisions, understanding the longer term impacts of them in a way that hasn't been possible before. So we're pretty excited about everything enabling that.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that. Now, obviously, there's one thing to have great technology. There's a whole other dimension to actually driving adoption in large enterprises. What is your point of view on how do we accelerate the adoption curve of those exciting technologies, at scale at large enterprises?
Yeah, I think, the most important thing is always showing the proof, right? And I think it's your guys' work and the work you've been doing to showcase your customers where really putting proper investment dollars behind this and really driving a strategic transformation can have phenomenal business results. And I think that's the main, you have to really believe that and get on that journey. And I think an important part of accelerating that is on executives to understand the broader impact this can have across their organizations. So not thinking of this as an X-specific supply chain only problem, but thinking of it as a finance problem, as a marketing problem, as a how do we join the dots problem. Sort of mindset shift from this is X thing that I need to solve Y into actually this is part of my broader digital transformation. This is actually part of how I keep my company moving forward into the AI age, if you will. And so I think there, you just have to continue to push through those implementation cycles, have to continue to see that broader vision. The thing that I worry about is that if we're not ambitious enough about these projects, they get stalled. And if you only pilot forever and then you don't kind of roll out full, you never realize the benefit. So it's a long way of saying understanding the business case and then, being ambitious with it.
Awesome. Now, Nikki, back to you. One of the things that I found interesting, you mentioned that with supply chain technology, especially planning, you have an impact on business results. At the same time, the moment you plan better, you're more efficient, that has a humongous impact on sustainability. If we think about sustainability and supply chain sort of together, what is your point of view on that market? Is that a niche or should we see them separate? What are some of the key players and what are your expectations of this market?
Yeah, I think first thing to say is sustainability is now firmly a business priority. When you look at the number of companies that have made net zero commitments over the last few years in aggregate, I think they account for 2/3 of the revenue of the largest companies globally. And corporate action is just one side of it, but we also see consumers and investors are continue to be pushing and actually driving change here. And what is interesting to us is that supply chain is increasingly in focus because most of the critical sustainability aspects are really rooted here. Examples would be Scope 3, greenhouse gas emissions, human rights, and the list goes on. And on top of all of that, we see regulation creeping in. And we also feel that the EU is really driving the bus here. But we shouldn't see it as a bounded EU piece, but it has global connotations and will apply to global companies and non-EU companies. The most prevalent piece or most prevalent initiative is the EU's Green Deal. And I would maybe like to highlight two particular initiatives under the Green Deal that target supply chains. The first one is the so-called EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CS3D, which essentially requires companies to perform or undertake due diligence of environmental and social human rights issues across their global supply chain. A case in point, as of last year in 2023, Germany introduced what many believe is the first foray into CS3D, which is the German Supply Chain Act. And that is in full swing and will have repercussions across the EU and beyond. The second initiative to highlight is the EU's Circular Economy Action Plan. One of the particular interesting pieces is the digital product passport, which would require companies to disclose product level data, not just SKU level data, but actually unit level data in a lot of granularity. And what is also interesting is that supply chain, according to a survey that we did, that supply chain systems will be the biggest feeder of that data. And this will be put in action next year, starting with the battery industry, where they will be required to disclose under the digital product passport, and many industries will follow. Having said all of that, the pace of change is still uncertain, given the economic uncertainty, given political backlash that we see. However, the train has now firmly left the station, which means there's a lot of opportunity for, to your question, a lot of opportunity for specialist sustainability service providers or tools providers to help companies to really bed down processes, data, and metrics. And coming back to 09 and the intervention point here, we believe O9 is particularly well placed to take these sustainability metrics and ultimately bring it into the integrated business planning process to ultimately drive better decision making across all metrics and ensure goal attainment, top down, bottom up, including sustainability.
Awesome. No, well explained. Thank you for that. Now, you mentioned that already Generation invested in O9 twice. First time in 22 and then another round in 23. Why is that, and what makes you excited about the business problems that we are solving for our clients?
Well, it's a very big problem that you solve, so it's a very big opportunity. It's probably worth explaining a bit how our investment process works to sort of answer that. So we work in what we call a roadmap process, which effectively means we do a very big piece of research on a given space and think about the big problems that area faces and think about what is the best possible way to address those problems. So we had, to Nikki's point, for many years thought about how big the supply chain, sort of better answering supply chain problems is across an organization. And so we spent a lot of time looking at companies that might solve that. And O9 really stood out to us for the beginning. So I think actually for many years, we kind of watched you guys from afar, and you were very high on our list of things that we sort of really wanted to understand further. So it's actually been, in theory, a 2-year journey, but actually for us, a lot longer than that. So we were very, very excited from the outside because it really seemed like you were solving this huge problem in a very strategic way with excellent technology. And then I think once we invested and once we got under the hood, you guys continued to execute like flawlessly and some on the plan that we had set out and that you guys had set out. So really we're excited because we really believe in the vision and the product. And then since we've partnered with you guys, it's been truly awesome.
Been a good journey,
Yeah,
for sure.
I don't know.
Well, what do you actually expect from O9 in the next 3 years? And how will that impact, obviously, the clients that we proudly serve?
Well, also to maybe to add to Lucia's point, we also saw O9 really continue to exceed our initial expectations. And at the same time, we also continue to see strong interest from clients to invest in next generation planning tools, which also kept us very interesting and wanted to continue to be a very strong investor in the company. And then in terms of the things to maybe expect over the next 3 years, it goes back down probably for us, back down to the actual data architecture, which is one of the things that Lucia also alluded to when we looked at O9 from afar as a potentially winning architecture for the next generation of integrated business planning. So that architecture, and we've seen it in action already at AIM 10X last year, where it enables O9 to connect the dots between demand planning, supply planning, but also procurement and the commercial side of things, all by integrating sustainability. And by connecting more of these dots, that will ultimately be ever valuable for your customers and help your customers ultimately adopt fast and scale in a changing world.
What do we expect to see? So I think 2 things. One is just more of the same, like more continued great execution, more helping your customers accelerate their journeys, sort of digitalizing their supply chain. We're really cognizant too that some of your customers are sort of the biggest and most important companies in their fields for accelerating the transition in their own ways and play a really key part in that. So we're really excited about that and just continued excellent execution. But I think the second thing is just that continued innovation on the product side, right? So I'm sure that you'll also be speaking today about what you guys have been building with generative AI, what you've been able to unlock with the ESG module. And I think as we continue to see you just building more on top of everything that's already there, like making it even more integrated across the organization, and watching more and more customers go on that journey. Because, we can sit in our office and talk about, and we have for years, how important we think integrated supply chain planning is. But that doesn't mean anything until people are actually doing it and until you guys are helping people do that. Yeah. So we're excited for that.
100%, and we're super excited as well. So that concludes today's session. So I want to thank both of you for joining AIM 10X and sharing your thoughts. And let's do it another time next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.